You know, it's Halloween. I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare.
What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Will, and you're listening to One Good Scare, where we explore our favorite horror movies. Today, I'm excited to dive into one of the best sci-fi horror movies of all time. Literally, it's an all-time classic. 1979's Alien. And I have a special guest for the second half of the show. Michael, he's the co-host of the Opening Kill podcast. Rather than an extensive scene-by-scene narration of the movie like I normally do, I'll simply do a condensed version that covers all the major plot points, and I'll drop in a few cut-ins along the way. And remember, my goal with One Good Scare is to enhance your viewing experience, not replace it. So if you've never seen Alien, or if it's been a while, my encouragement is that you watch it first and then come back and give the show a listen. But One Good Scare also serves as a sort of visual aid for your mind's eye. So if you'd prefer to listen than watch, hey, I appreciate that too. Just know, One Good Scare is essentially one gigantic spoiler. Alright, now that I've cleared all of that up, let's dive into Alien. I should probably admit up front that I've often thought of Alien as less a horror movie and more a sci-fi movie. And yes, I know sci-fi horror exists. I think it's because I've always put Alien alongside its sequels, which are generally sci-fi action. But having watched this a few more times in prep for this episode, I'm more convinced now that it is a horror movie before anything else. And it's kind of forced me to rethink my top 25 horror movies list, because it absolutely belongs on there. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, Alien is widely regarded as one of the best horror movies and just overall movies of all time. IMDb has it at an 8.5 out of 10, which places it at number 49 of the top 250 movies of all time, regardless of genre. Rotten Tomatoes lists it at a 93% tomato meter, with an equally terrific 94% popcorn meter. And honestly, this movie deserves every accolade, every kind word, every recommendation, and every praise you can heap on it. The set design, lighting, score, claustrophobia, creature design all work together to create one of the most tense and anxiety-inducing horror movies ever made, hands down. The cinematography makes you feel a deep sense of place. You really feel like you're on the Nostromo, while also making you feel kinda boxed in. Is it possible to feel claustrophobic with wide-angle zoom-out shots? My gut says no, but this movie made my gut squirm, so there's that. And the iconic creature design and lighting are both terrific, and even now, nearly 50 years after it was released, both of them hold up today. Listen, for a good while, we're not exactly sure what the crew is dealing with. The shadows give us enough of a glimpse, while also hiding the reveal until the end. And Alien gave us the iconic final girl Ripley. She is a true badass in every sense of the idea. Also, the movie's themes are pretty expansive, and though we'll explore this in the guest portion of the episode, I'll give you a teaser now that this movie is far more than just a killer alien meets helpless crew in space. There's depth and even a little bit of a controversial angle to what this movie is actually trying to say to us. Alright, let's just dive right in. The film opens in complete silence, and we watch as the camera pans slowly through the interior of the UCSS Nostromo, giving us the sense that it's cold and abandoned. Narrow metallic hallways stretch endlessly throughout as condensation drips from overhead pipes. The slow rhythmic taps giving us our first sound. Computer screens give off an eerie glow, casting light across quiet, empty space. The Nostromo seems strangely devoid of human life. Then, as the camera pans through the ship, lights activate, one by one, as if the Nostromo is suddenly coming alive. The ship's computer, called Mother, comes online, and one by one, 7 pods open slowly. They look a bit like coffins, and inside each pod is a member of the Nostromo's crew. Quick side note, I'll give you their names now to make it easier to follow along. The 7 crew members are Dallas, Lambert, Kane, Parker, Ash, Brett, and Ripley. It seems they've been in hypersleep, and as the pods open fully, they awaken slowly, their bodies stiff and groggy. The camera then takes us to the galley, where they sit at a table drinking coffee and eating breakfast. The conversation seems natural, as if they've known each other for some time. But it quickly turns tense when Parker and Brett inquire about their pay and bonuses, and there's something about it that seems familiar, as if the two bring it up right on cue. And for a second, we get the sense that the crew are more co-workers than friends. Alright, a real quick cut-in. I've always thought this opening scene was super interesting. It's not how you expect a sci-fi horror movie to open. It's almost serene. Too serene. Soft music, ambient lighting. Yet the Nostromo is cold and empty and almost sterile. It's this weird juxtaposition of a surface-level calm that hides chaos underneath. Almost like a rip current. Also, the breakfast scene maintains that same duality. The crew members are familiar to and friendly with each other, but there seems to be some underlying tension. To me, this opener is a great way to set the stage, and it's a bit uncomfortable to watch if I'm honest. Okay, back to the movie. Dallas explains why they've been awakened. It seems Mother has intercepted a transmission from a nearby planet, and because it may be intelligent, company policy requires the Nostromo to investigate. This doesn't go over well with the crew, and Parker immediately asks how much extra pay they'll receive. Each crew member reacts uniquely, and Ripley reminds them company policy states that refusal to investigate will render their contract null and void. They wouldn't be paid at all. Dallas acknowledges that he doesn't want to investigate, but that he doesn't have much of a choice, and orders the Nostromo to change course. As the ship nears the planet, it begins to react to its atmosphere. Lights flash, violent shaking, and the descent is rough. The ship crashes into the planet's surface, tossing the crew around. They survive, but as they scan the surface, it seems hostile and lifeless. Storms brew outside, and the terrain is barren and unforgiving. Inside the ship, Parker and Brett assess the damage and potential repairs. They're stranded, at least for the immediate future. Meanwhile, Dallas organizes a team to investigate the signal. Kane and Lambert, who have different reactions to the task. Kane is excited, while Lambert appears scared. Ripley stays behind with Ash, and the two monitor the ship and communication systems. The investigation team departs, closing the airlock behind them. As they step onto the surface, the environment is unforgiving, and visibility is almost non-existent. The wind is deafening, and their lights provide little illumination. They move carefully and slowly, trying to discern how best to move forward. And while they do so, the signal grows stronger as they approach a structure half buried in the rock. Confusion grows as they step inside the ship. It's cavernous and strangely silent. The architecture feels like a cathedral, as if it were built for beings far larger than human beings. In the center of the chamber, they discover something horrifying. A massive alien corpse fused to a chair-like structure. Its chest is ruptured from the inside. Lambert, Kane, and Dallas look on, stunned and silent. It seems they're trying to make sense of everything they're witnessing. Alright, another quick cut-in. The set design of this scene is gorgeous. We really get a sense of place and size, and it's another juxtaposition between the sheer size of the cavern and the claustrophobia the place evokes. We get the sense that whatever is or was occupying this ship was fucking huge, which simultaneously makes Dallas, Kane, and Lambert look significantly smaller and more frail. Okay, back to the movie. With the signal growing stronger, Kane follows it, alone, into a lower chamber. And what he discovers is both confusing and horrifying. A room filled with what looks like egg sacs stretching endlessly. As he moves closer to inspect one of the egg sacs, it opens slowly. And inside, something is moving. Suddenly, the creature launches upward, smashes through Kane's helmet, and attaches itself to his face, its tail wrapping around Kane's neck like a noose. Kane screams and collapses to the floor. Dallas and Lambert drag Kane back to the Nostromo, but when they reach it, Ripley refuses to let them in. She is calm and calculated as she lets them know that quarantine protocol exists for a purpose. They don't know what the organism is, and it could kill them all. Dallas and Lambert plead with Ripley, who is steadfast in her refusal. Then, Ash steps forward and overrides Ripley's authority and opens the airlock, letting Dallas, Lambert, Kane, and the unknown organism into the Nostromo. Once inside, the crew takes Kane to the infirmary and examine the creature attached to his face. It looks like a spider, except it has a long tail, and there's something being forced down Kane's throat. Ash tries to cut it off Kane's face, but as its blood spills out, it begins burning through the floor and continues through to the lower decks. Panic sets in as the crew realizes the acid blood could breach the hull, except it stops just in time. They realize they can't cut it off. They simply need to wait it out. And within a few hours, the creature detaches from Kane's face and falls off. He wakes up confused, but seemingly unharmed. Ripley senses something is wrong, but Dallas wants to continue their journey. Then the crew gathers for a meal. Kane is hungry and weak, and for a second, things seem normal once again. Alright, here's my third quick cut-in. There's something really interesting about this meal scene compared to the opening meal at the start of the film. In the beginning, the tension seems to be rooted in dissatisfaction with pay, and is marked by impersonal conversations and relationships. The second meal, though, feels more familial. They're united around a common concern for Kane, and a desire to get on with their journey. It's an interesting shift, because we'd almost expect the scenes to be reversed. Show us the family-like concern and relationships at first, so we grow attached to the crew. And then give us the concern and fear afterwards, which seems like a natural outflow of those relationships. But watching it, it hit different. The crew is concerned for Kane, sure, but they're also concerned about themselves. And that disconnect is important to the claustrophobia of the movie. It's not just that bad things are happening to you and the crew, and it's not just that the spaceship feels confined. It's that bad things are happening in confined spaces to you and the crew, and you're all alone to fend for yourself because you can't fully trust the person next to you. Suddenly, Kane starts to choke. At first, it seems like nothing. Then he starts convulsing violently before collapsing onto the table. Blood spews from his mouth as the crew tries to restrain him. Then, in one of the most shocking moments in horror movie history, a small creature bursts through Kane's ribcage, screaming and killing Kane. It gets away, leaving the crew terrified and in shock. Within a few seconds, Dallas orders the ship to be sealed off, while Ash says the creature needs to be found immediately. They install motion trackers, gather flamethrowers, and prepare to destroy the creature as soon as they find it. And to make matters worse, the creature appears to be growing at an alarming rate. Dallas, in an attempt to move the creature to the airlock, crawls through the vent shafts, guided by Lambert's motion tracker. As he moves, though, the creature stalks him, and as the tracker's beeping accelerates, the creature appears behind him, killing him instantly. Alright, last cut in, I promise. These scenes are among the most shocking and iconic in horror movie history. If you're like me, you've been watching horror movies for decades, and on the surface they don't seem like much, especially compared to more modern sci-fi horror movies that ramp up the gore. But the scenes with Kane and Dallas are designed, the lighting, the set pieces, the sound engineering, to create a discomfort within us. The horror is in the lack of understanding about what they're dealing with, the complete loss of control as they try to figure it out, and their destruction at the hands of the creature. It might sound odd to describe these scenes as beautiful, but if you watch them carefully, you'll see a masterclass in lighting and cinematography, and you may start to feel a little helpless, knowing that what's coming for the rest of the crew is beyond awful. Alright, let's finish it up. With Dallas gone, Ripley essentially takes control over the Nostromo, and while accessing Mother, she discovers the ship's true mission, and it's not to get the crew home safely. The company intercepted a signal from LV-426 and directed the crew to investigate. That part is true. But there's something else. The crew was told to bring back the creature for further investigation and study, and it didn't matter if the crew disagreed, because they were expendable. Suddenly, Ash steps in and tells Ripley that the creature is perfect. No conscience, remorse, or sense of morality. Then, in an attempt to keep her quiet, he tries to suffocate her. But Parker and Lambert intervene by decapitating Ash, revealing him to be an android. Just before Parker destroys him, Ash tells Ripley that the creature cannot be killed, and good luck trying. With the crew now down to Lambert, Parker, Brett, and Ripley, they decide to abandon ship as it's the only way to survive. But things go downhill quickly, as Brett is ambushed while searching for the cat in the lower levels. Then Parker and Lambert are killed as they gather supplies, leaving Ripley to confront the creature by herself. In a bold move, she initiates the Nostromo's self-destruct protocol, and appears to be resolute that the ship must be destroyed. Alarms blare as the countdown begins, and she tries frantically to escape, but has to restart the self-destruct sequence once again. With only seconds to spare, she reaches the Narcissus, a small shuttle, and escapes just as the Nostromo explodes behind her, taking everyone, including the creature, with it. As Ripley prepares for hypersleep, we're faced with the terrifying reality that the creature has stowed away on the Narcissus. Ripley, realizing she has to fight it, puts on a pressure suit, opens the airlock, grabs a harpoon gun, and confronts the alien once and for all. She gains the upper hand and forces it out of the shuttle, but it hangs on for dear life. And in one final act of defiance, Ripley ignites the engines, sending the creature into the vastness of space. Finally safe, Ripley records a log entry detailing what happened to the Nostromo and its crew. Then she enters hypersleep and drifts alone through space, with no idea when she will be saved. And Alien has come to an end. Alright, obviously I have thoughts, but let's jump into the second half of the show, and you'll hear all about them. I have with me in the studio, at distance, Michael Duran. He is the co-host of one of the most unique podcasts, horror movie podcasts I've heard recently. Really love it. Have loved it for a few months now. The Opening Kill podcast, and Michael's with us. Michael, thank you for being with us. Introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, first off. I appreciate it. And yeah, I'm Michael, co-host with my good friend Brian O'Connor. We have the Opening Kill podcast, and every week we just like to break down a select movie, kind of go over a lot of the kills, specifically the opening one, kind of dive into it, see what makes it unique and whether or not it's effective or not. Just have a whole lot of fun. Like, it's just for fun, lighthearted, and we just try to keep it light, but it's a lot of fun. We drop episodes every single Thursday. With the holidays, we've been off a day or two here and there, but try to pretty consistently drop them on Thursdays. So if you like horror movies, definitely check out the podcast. We'd love to have you along.
Definitely check out the podcast, guys. You know, I'm considering editing this part out, but I probably will leave it in because I'm a glutton for punishment. But Michael and I have been trying to record for about 8 months now. And the one time we were able to record way back in the spring, we both were. Now, Michael lives on the West Coast, right? So it's technically just after noon his time. It's 3 p.m., a little after 3 p.m. my time. We were both experiencing power outages at the same time on the same day during recording. So I think he was recording on his phone in his car, and I was recording using my hotspot on my cell phone. And that, guys, that doesn't have enough bandwidth for anything, let alone to try and record a whole episode. So that was a crash and burn, and just for the last couple months, we've been trying to get up just to do this. So it's no small feat that we are here to talk about this movie. So I'm praying away all the bad shit that could happen in the next 45 minutes.
Let's knock on all the wood we can.
Seriously, so we can get this done. All right, so as you guys know from the front end of the show, we're discussing Alien. Now, what you may not know is that whenever I invite a guest on, I always have them pick the movie. It just makes for livelier discussion, maybe even more passionate discussion when the guest chooses the movie and they can't look at me and say, "What the fuck did you have me watch?" So Michael picked Alien. Michael, why Alien of all the horror movies in the world?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's an important movie, especially given the climate we are living in currently, especially in the United States. There's a lot of themes in here that I think are important to discuss, and mostly I chose it because I wanted to discuss some of those things with someone else.
Sure.
And it's also just a movie that did not stick with me the first few times I've watched it, and I just kind of like, it's whatever, not really my thing. Sci-fi in general, not really my thing. But this movie, when I watched it again more recently, it really stuck with me, and I think about it all the time. I think about the themes and how well done those themes are, to make you really think. And it's a movie that I think opens so many discussion paths that are just fun to go down.
I'm with you on a couple fronts here, because from almost my whole life, from the time I was old enough to watch this movie up until maybe about 3 days ago, I considered this movie sci-fi, not really even a horror movie, because the rest of the trilogy is pretty much they're sci-fi movies, right? They take place in space, they've got aliens, they've got all these things that are sci-fi related. But having watched it a couple of times recently in prep for this, I'm like pretty quickly realizing that this might be one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Definitely one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever made, if not the greatest ever. So I'm having to rethink some of my life here, because this has to make a couple of lists that I've neglected to put it on because I've classified it differently. So yeah, I thank you for the upheaval that I'm experiencing.
No problem. It's my pleasure.
It's a good upheaval though, right? Some changes are really, really worth it and really good. So, all right. So I want to dive right into those themes, because I have thoughts, and I know you have thoughts, obviously. So let's turn the tables to you a little bit.
Okay.
When you say themes, what one or two themes in particular stick out the most?
So for me, the biggest one, there is a lot, but the biggest one is, I think, the display of being impregnated without a choice to like get rid of it. Like, and I like that they went with it affects men too. I think that aspect makes it so efficient. I think it's the most impactful pro-choice movie ever made. I truly do believe that. I think it's done so well and so scary. Like, I'm a big horror fan. Not a lot of horror movies like really like scare me per se, but the idea of like the face hugger in here, that is my nightmare. I can't imagine anything worse than the face huggers in Aliens, personally. There's nothing scarier than that. Like, just the claustrophobia, the forceful penetration of your body, the forceful impregnation of your body is horrifying to really think about. And so I think that specific theme is the one that sticks out the most to me. And I think it's so effective in these movies.
Yeah. So a couple days ago, I had sent Michael a DM that said, "Hey, I have this wild theory about this movie." And I always try. So my brain process is, I'm going to watch the movie. I'm going to come up with my own ideas. Like, here's how I'm analyzing it. And then generally I'll go and do some research to see how off center I am. In this case, I didn't have enough time to do that third part until about 25 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago. And so my wild theory was that, hey, man, I really think this movie, whether it intends to or not, might actually be a metaphor for forced pregnancy. And in maybe a twisted way, or turning the tables kind of way, sort of, I hate to say it this way, but giving men a dose of their own medicine, or the medicine that they administer elsewhere, right, to women.
100%. 100%.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so it's a grimy, gritty, sort of like really uncomfortable theme to really sit down and think through and consider. But I mean, even the alien, the chest burster, looks phallic. There's no way around it, right? There's no way you could watch this movie and not think to yourself, that is a gigantic phallus coming out of that man's chest.
Yep.
And then you sit there and you're like, wait a minute, hold on. How did that happen in the first place? Unwanted, forced upon, right? And now you're starting to dive into some things that, honestly, we need to talk about. Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, it's here. We live in a society where choice is being stripped in a lot of ways, and opportunities are being stripped. And I think this movie, and maybe this is just indicative of kind of the era in which the movie was made, right, in the late 70s. I feel like a lot of late 70s, 80s movies were far more socially conscious in this sort of subversive way, as opposed to movies now, which try sometimes to be too preachy and kind of get lost in that preachiness. So, all right, I'm going to stop talking. Michael, pick up where I'm leaving off here. Let's talk about these themes. Is it uncomfortable? Was it uncomfortable for you to sit down, watch this, and realize, holy shit, like, this is a pretty core thing to this movie?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that makes it so scary to me, is the reality of that the women in our society have to live under, with these restrictions on their own choices to their own bodies. I think it's absolutely insane. And especially, I don't know the exact state or anything, but there's this instance where a woman was unresponsive and she was pregnant, and they made her like stay alive she was in an incubator, which is such,
I think it was Georgia, if I remember right.
Something like that. And that is such a insane thing to wrap your head around, where it's scary. And that's why this is such, to me right now in my life, such an important movie, is because we're seeing it played out on the news cycle. And so when you said earlier where it's like, it gives the men a dose of their own medicine, perfect. Like, we need more of that, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds strange, right? But it's true. You know,
it is.
And I think the reality is, and I feel like it's probably important to say up front, that you and I are, we're cisgender, heterosexual men, right? So we're coming at this not only from a pretty narrow world perspective, right? Our own experience is narrow in that sense, but we're also coming at this conversation from a place of privilege as well, right? That the world around us has catered to especially cisgender heterosexual men. And I hate to say that we've been the predominant voice in society for centuries, maybe even millennia, but that's really, history has borne that out. So we can sit with that discomfort, and you can sit with your disagreement on that, but the reality is what it is, right? Feelings, emotions aside, just the truth of it is what it is. And so I know that those things are true for both of us. it is uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to sit there and watch it and think, damn, like, what does this say about not just society generically, right, as a whole, but me specifically as an individual, right? Because when the rubber meets the road, push come to shove, like each of us is grappling with our own stuff amidst these things, right?
Right.
And I know folks I know plenty of folks. I grew up with folks. I had folks in my life. I worked alongside folks who would say, whose primary argument against choice is that, it violates in a sense their own conscience, right? Like,
Right.
Like I disagree with the ability to choose to make those kinds of choices. So therefore my preference takes priority over a person's choice. But the reality is, like, even if you disagree with the decisions that people make, you shouldn't disagree with their ability to make those decisions, right? You can disagree with the end result, fine. That's a whole separate thing. But the ability of a singular person to make a choice for his, her, their life, we should be really, really mindful of how we engage those conversations. Is that fair? Does that seem fair?
No, exactly. And it kind of leads into the other heavy theme in this movie, which is corporations, evil corporations, sacrificing human beings to further their agenda, where it's like you can disagree on abortion till the cows come home, whatever. No one's asking you to wear an I Heart Abortion shirt, but like, it's just put that to the side and realize you don't get to mandate that choice, because otherwise, if you were able to force, okay, hey, you have to have the baby, when it gets here, then everybody should do everything they can to provide for it, instead of being like, no, you're born now, we don't give a fuck about you. Like,
yeah,
so
you're right, man. You're right. It's rare that I'm speechless, guys. It's like super rare.
Yeah.
But it's the difference. It feels like it's the difference between, being pro-life and pro-birth, right? It's one thing to say, I'm pro-life and, and then function as if you're not. You know what I'm saying? Like, to be pro-birth is to say, each fetus, each embryo, right? Each pregnancy deserves to live. Okay, if that's your end goal, right? That makes me pro-life. But what happens when that baby is here, and you wash your hands of any responsibility, social or otherwise, and say, well, we're gonna pull funding from education. We're gonna pull funding for support programs, right? We're gonna cut healthcare, right? All these things. We're gonna not have rent control in place, and now families are forced to the breadlines, and they're forced to the streets. Or you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
being pro-life needs to be more holistic and maybe more all-encompassing than just, well, that pregnancy needs to go to term.
Exactly.
And there's so much corporate shit around that.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's a heartbreaking reality, but like I said, I think this movie handles both of those situations perfectly, and it just makes it so easy to digest, even if I guess you don't agree with it. I feel like you still have to hear the message and respect how it's laid out, because I'm someone who's not. I think a lot of the more recent horror movies, they do, like you did mention, it's like they have the themes, but they are too heavy-handed. And even though this is pretty heavy-handed, it's still just done masterfully to where it's so easy to just take in and respect, for me personally, at least.
Yeah, you're right. It's I think maybe it speaks to that feeling I had a couple days ago where I was like, I have this wild thought about what this movie may be trying to say, or at least might be a metaphor for, whether, again, intentionally or otherwise. Because my first viewings of this movie, the first dozen times I watched it, it's great with suspense. It's got an iconic final girl, right? Which we'll talk about in a second. Like, Ripley is in some ways the anti-hero, if only because she's a woman. you know, like it's it's one thing now, almost 50 years later, to say badass final girl heroine. Like, yeah, we've progressed enough societally to respect that and really honor that, give her flowers. But 50 years ago, she was the outlier, and to see men, especially in this movie, fall victim, and then to be essentially have this woman come and save the day, not a common thing. Definitely wasn't a trope. That's for sure.
No.
So, I feel like the movie, it does such a good job of yes, being heavy-handed. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. But until you see it, it's super subtle. Like, it's the kind of thing where the switch in your brain needs to flip on pretty quickly and pretty brightly for it to be like, holy shit, look at that. And then be like, right. I don't really want to look at that. And then grapple with the fact that you probably need to sit there and look at that, right? So,
yeah.
All right. So the horrors persist in this movie. Layered horrors persist. What's interesting, Michael, something I found interesting just as a horror movie, right, is that there's surprisingly very little gore. I mean, outside of the chest burster scene, there's not a ton of gore. There's really not a ton of violence, really, either. I mean, that tends to be that scene is the sort of the almost all of it, right?
Yeah.
What do you think makes the movie so effective as a horror movie?
Ooh, that's a good one. I mean, this answer is just like a really simple way.
Sure.
I think it's got one of the best creature designs in the history of film, and that is genuinely scary. I think the xenomorph is incredible. It's scary to look at, and then there's so many little details to it too that are just insane, like from the second mouth to the elongated skull that in certain lighting you can see the regular skull underneath. I just think the whole design is incredible. And earlier you were talking about like the phallic nature of the chestburster. The xenomorph itself, the head is very phallic, and the even the face hugger, that one's actually vaginal. The face of the face hugger.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of genital imagery within these movies, and some of like the egg sacs that aren't in this one, but in future ones, they just straight up look like a giant vagina. So that's always been an aspect to all these alien designs, is always been very genitalia inspired. But I think the xenomorph, first and foremost, makes this an effective horror movie because the creature's just straight up scary to look at.
Yeah. Okay, so again, once you see it, you can't unsee it. My thoughts didn't even go to the shape of the face hugger or the egg sacs or any. Okay, so now I'm going to have to watch these movies again just because I can't not. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the xenomorph is probably one of the most iconic, right, horror villains in all of cinema, right? Mm-hmm. And there are probably very few creatures that rise to that level. Maybe Predator. I know there was an Alien versus Predator series, right? Predator is definitely one of them, but beyond that, I don't know many other creature designs that even come close to what the xenomorph was. And they only enhance that in especially Aliens, the sequel, right? 7-8 years later. Which, by the way, I know a lot of horror movies, especially creature features, they tend to use this really cheap looking CGI. The xenomorph was all practical effects, guys. We're talking about a stunt person in costume, right? We're talking makeup and costume design and creature design. Like, this is the pinnacle. And a lot of these things are the pinnacles of human creative achievement, right? 50 years ago, human beings were creating these kinds of things. And I hate to say that we've regressed, but CGI is a massive regression in creature design and movement. Yeah. I will toot the horn of practical effects every chance that I get, for sure. All right, Michael, I've managed to find an article that deals with this movie and some of the themes we've been talking about. It's the article is called. It's from the Film Pupil website. The Alien Feminine: Birth and Pregnancy as a Horror Spectacle by Emily Costello. And I'm going to read a couple of snippets, and I want us to sort of explore these ideas, okay? Ridley Scott's Alien is one of the most terrifying and gripping horror films I have ever seen. The setting, the Nostromo, a claustrophobic ship far away from Earth, the gradual picking off of the crew makes for a gruesome watch. Agreed. Ellen Ripley, the crew's warrant officer, one of the horror genre's most impressive final girls, is the only survivor of the extraterrestrial horrific attack. Awesome. The film deals with many themes, including corruption, lack of care for the crew by the wealthy commercial company they work for, as well as general morality issues frequently found in horror sci-fi films. Yet throughout the film is a simmering fear, a creeping threat of impregnation. The alien hosts itself inside its victims and spreads through birth, albeit unconventional, involving certain death. All right, she goes on to say that, let's see, this birth is graphic and disgusting, but like human birth, reflects the physical toll that can be taken on the female body, the blood, sweat, and tears, as well as the very real danger pregnancy can pose for a woman. The involuntary implantation of the alien within Kane could be a metaphor for sexual assault. Barbara Creed even described it as the fear of male rape and female anatomy, horrible objects of dread and fascination. It is undeniable that part of the meaning behind the portrayal of birth in Alien is the sheer power possessed by pregnant women and the fear that it inspires in not just men, but the patriarchal society as a whole. Now, if this were a church setting, I would say amen, and all God's people likewise in turn said amen. Because as a man, right? Again, as a cisgender heterosexual man, like, yeah, fuck the patriarchy. Truly. Like, I have a wife,
Yeah.
I have a daughter, and I have two sons who we are doing our damned best to sort of shirk the trappings of being, for my boys, of growing up into men, and for my daughter, being bound to that kind of man, right?
Yeah.
And so, what are your thoughts? I'm super curious.
No, like, same where you're kind of talking about the kids. I have a daughter now, and I have a son as well, and same. That's the track of we're trying to raise these kids in this world. It's terrifying, but yeah, I mean, I think she hit the nail on the head, and I love how she also brought up the that it's a man who's having to go through this as well. It's just, yeah, that was really good. I'm trying to like digest that. That was a really good article. You're gonna have to send that to me. I want to read the whole thing.
I'll definitely forward it to you. It's pretty lengthy, and she goes into. I mean, she talks about abortion laws, the horror many women feel watching abortion laws become overturned, like Roe v. Wade recently in the U.S. The fear of being forced to carry a fetus against their will is reflected in Ripley's disgust and terror at the company's greed and lack of morality surrounding her and her crew. So I'm guessing, I don't know what the date on this article is, but I'm assuming this was probably written in the last maybe 4 years, somewhere in there.
Probably around when Alien Romulus came out would be my guess.
Which was what, 2020, late 2023?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Is that right? So
Yeah.
maybe that was the catalyst for it. But I mean, she mentions a few other movies as well that deal with this issue, and you know, it's interesting because I feel like this is sort of the beauty of watching horror movies, because I feel like, Michael, you could probably attest to this in some ways, right? Whenever someone that maybe doesn't know me closely, right, someone that's on the peripheral or that's a coworker, that kind of thing, whenever I tell them, like, man, I love horror movies, I have a couple of horror shows, inevitably the first thing they say or do is either, why do you like horror? Or, ooh, horror? Like, this is like one of these two reactions, right? And it's always been my contention, like, hey, horror movies, the best ones anyway, they usually have something to say. And they force us in their own unique way to sit with whatever they're trying to present and really force us to grapple with it, right? Maybe they make us feel things we don't like to feel, to experience things that we would otherwise avoid, right? They force us into this space in relative safety where we can wrestle with some really uncomfortable things. And usually that's the end of the conversation.
Right.
Like people. But I also realize that of the movie genres that exist, to me, horror might be the smartest of them all. Agree or disagree?
Yeah.
Or
100% agree. I
Okay.
think it's the most like diverse type of movie from just how many different subgenres of horror there is, and just how like it does, in my opinion. I'm a horror fan, so I might just be glazing it, but I think it is the genre that tackles the actual issues better than any other. I mean, you see it from, Us, Get Out. You see it from to Alien, all the way to what was that other one that just came out? Now I'm drawing a blank on that one. But there's just so many different types of things that scare us as a society. So it just gives you endless things to pull from. I think it's the most creative genre at the moment, even though it gets a reputation for being the laziest, which is the thing I've never understood. Because I think horror is doing the most unique things in the industry currently, but that's just my opinion as a horror fan.
No, I think you're right too. I mean, people use the term elevated horror, right, for certain movies within a subgenre, right? The Babadook, Hereditary, Midsummer usually come to mind first off. Get Out, Us, those are considered elevated horror, but to me it's sort of a misnomer because I think horror is a smart sort of elevated genre of movie. Again, the best ones, right? There's a lot of horror movies that are not elevated, that aren't really saying a whole lot, and they're just entertaining. And there's absolutely a place for entertaining horror that just keeps you occupied for 90 minutes or 2 hours, however long. But I think the best ones are subtle and creative enough to really deal with some potentially rough themes in really sharp ways that force us to think. Bring Her Back is one of those more recent movies that the first time I was expecting a demonic possession movie because that's what it was, sort of marketed as. And you have to get people in the seats. I get that. Right. But then when I watched it again recently, I was like, wait a minute. The demonic possession tale is kind of secondary to the monstrosity of not the foster mom, but of the loss that everybody in this movie has experienced somehow, right? And so you start thinking through it that way, and you start looking at the movie slightly differently, maybe in some ways the way that it was intended to be viewed. Okay, but I also feel like that's a lot of work.
I mean, yeah. And a lot of people just want the surface level, just go pop some popcorn, watch a flick, and which is fine. There's a place for that. But horror also has that thing if you want it. So
for sure. For sure. Like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, no one's going to, misunderstand that as a PhD dissertation, right? On, human alien interactions. But, so there, and I love Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So there's a place and there's a space for that kind of movie. But, all right, I'm going to read you something else, Michael, real quick, from that same article. So this is the same writer. She says, let's see. Hold on. Did I miss it? I did miss it. Never mind. Ignore me. Nope. I thought she was continuing with the theme of Alien, but she was talking about a different movie. And it was a pretty controversial, about face that I was like, wait a minute. Anyway, that's not here. So.
Fair enough.
There was one other thing I wanted to read from this article that wasn't what I was just trying to read. Okay, so all right, it's this last statement. The xenomorphs in Alien represent male fear of this female power, and therefore their desire to control it at all costs. That's interesting.
I like that.
The xenomorphs in Alien represent male fear of this female power, and therefore their desire to control it at all costs.
I mean,
Interesting.
yeah, I mean that works as a theme. I mean, everything they do is forceful, and it always results in your death. Like, they're completely controlling the situation. They're controlling how you are impregnated. They're controlling when you are to give birth and also die. That is very, not something I really thought about, but now that it's being said, I'm just like sitting with that, and I like what that's saying.
Now, I guess it's important to like clarify, right, that this is just dealing with the first movie, because in all the other movies, the xenomorph is sort of indiscriminate in who they kill, who they impregnate, right? Especially, but by the time you get to Aliens, just the second movie, the whole colony, right? Hundreds of people have been impregnated, and chest bursters are coming out of men, and right. So you have this massive shift tonally and thematically between the first and second movie. So just the first movie, and considering that scene with Cain, it would make sense, right? But the question is, so I'm trying to, like, maybe I'm overthinking this statement, but the xenomorphs representing male fear of this female power. Is their desire to control male fear or female power?
Probably a little bit of both, right?
Maybe both.
Yeah. I would think both. I mean, there does, that's such an interesting
It is, right? Like,
statement. Yeah.
That line is, pun intended, that line is pregnant with meaning.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure how to wrap my brain around it enough to think through it. I guess if the xenomorphs represent male power or male fear of female power, then ultimately the xenomorphs' goal and desire is to control women.
Right.
Which would fit in line with all the other things. In which case, there are some, I have no doubt, some who would immediately think through this movie in this way, the opposite of how we're talking about it. They would look at this movie as inherently man-hating, right?
Right, yeah.
Which to me feels silly. It feels silly, because it is silly, I think. You know, I think the devil's advocate of a situation forces us to look at the other side of the coin, right? It does, by default. And I think where oftentimes men can be reactive, right? We react emotionally, usually in anger or rage or frustration, some sort of aggressive, even borderline violent sort of way. And I don't mean violent like physically violent, but just our reactions are sharp. I think what this movie does is it almost forces us to reconcile some things for ourselves, right? Like, you know, my wife is a therapist. I work in the substance abuse field as a substance abuse counselor, and something I'm constantly telling folks, especially men, is listen, in the range of emotions you experience, if anger and rage is the most easily graspable thing, right? If it's the one that's the most, you're most likely to grapple for or grasp for and reach and hold on to, then we really need to work some of that out, right? There's a whole slew of emotions that you can experience before you get to anger, before you get to rage, before the result of those things becomes a reality. And oftentimes that's sort of, you know, the devil's advocate of that is often, well, not all anger is bad anger. No, you're not wrong. But if you can't tell the difference between good anger and bad anger, or negative anger and like constructive anger, then we're already behind the eight ball. I feel like this movie forces us to sort of sit with it a little bit, right? That I'm not patriarchal. Well, okay, like, sure. at the surface level of who you are, you may assume that. But what this movie does is it forces you to think through it individually. What do you feel when you see Cain impregnated? What do you feel when you see Cain, you know, the chest burster coming out of his chest? What do you feel when you know that Ripley is the badass and it's not someone else, right? What do you feel when you see men running helplessly from this thing instead of standing their ground, and Ripley's the only one who says, fuck this and fuck you, I'm going to take care of this, right? Like, and those questions force us to grapple deeper. Does that make sense?
No, totally. And like as I was sitting with it more, I came up with this other idea: is within the movie, the xenomorph is called the perfect specimen. So if you view it, so it's like, okay, so that's the top tier right there. Well, in society, historically, that is where the men have been above everybody else.
Oh, for sure.
And so if you view it as like just from a status point, I think it can be like male control, because it's the tier controlling everything else within its environment. So just another way to look at that. I think that's really interesting. And another thing that stood out to me is, let's talk about Ash for a second, because he's the cyborg character. Within this movie, there's a lot of theories about what his sexual desires are. A lot of people think he's a homosexual character. A lot of people think he's straight and can't perform because he's a robot, and therefore has a lot of animosity. And something that's really interesting is penetration is a huge part of the Alien franchise. And in this movie, Ash tries to actually kill Ripley by penetrating her with a pornographic magazine. Yeah, which is just another really like a little bit of heavy-handed theme, but I think it's just really well done. Because there's, especially right now on online culture for young men, there's so much like women hating. The reason you don't have a girlfriend is because of the woman, and so I think that aspect of Ash is a really interesting one to dive in, especially if he is, as a robot, a straight robot, but he can't perform, and so then he just sits around and hates females. I think that's just another layer that we could dive into about this movie. That was one that I didn't notice upon first watch. I actually read an article saying that it was a pornographic magazine. I was like, oh wow, that's a really interesting little detail there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a thought come to mind as you were sharing that regardless of how one views or understands pornography, right? In the best case scenario, it's a consensual thing, right? You have whoever the participants are consenting to that kind of thing, right? And they do that, right? It's produced with consenting adults, right, who are consuming it, let's say, right? Well, with Ash using that magazine to attempt to rape Ripley, you even have sort of the metaphor of something that would usually be in its absolute best case scenario would be between consenting people, right?
Right.
Being used non-consensually against someone, and there it's like it's just it's an unfortunate and gross reality in the world that something that is a beautiful thing between consenting human beings, right, is now being wielded and used in these aggressive, violent, non-consensual ways. Like, oh man, it gets under my skin.
Yeah.
the whole thing it feels so grimy, it makes your skin crawl, and yet it's an unfortunate reality in the world around us. That these things that are intended for good are used for harm, and for destruction.
And that can apply to anything, from not just like pornography. Anything can be wielded against people for harm, and oftentimes the people above us, that's exactly what they do. And it's this movie, it, like you said, it just gets under your skin. It's scary, legitimate, scary movie. And I think another reason I really love it on a simple terms is it's kind of like a slasher, which is my favorite subgenre of horror.
Yeah.
If it is a slasher, it's definitely an elevated slasher, but it still has all of those similar tropes. I mean, we have the final girl, which Ripley is, if she's not in your top 5 of final girls, I don't know what you're doing in life, because she is so incredible in this movie. Sigourney Weaver, just knocks it out of the park. You just feel how in control of the situation she truly is.
Yeah.
She just exudes confidence when the rest of the crew does not. Like, they are all so frantic, and she's always level-headed, even when she was about to make a really hard decision where she didn't want to let what's his name? The guy who gets chest burst.
Oh, Kane.
Kane. She didn't want to let Kane back on the ship.
Right.
She was like, no, we have protocols. We can't just let her in. And then Ash just overrides her, which, I mean, isn't that the patriarchy? Anytime a female, like a woman has a good idea, just like, well, no, we're going to go above you. So in every situation, she's level-headed, she's smart, she's brave, and just badass. So I think as far as a final girl, you can't really get better than her.
Yeah, I agree. Something I appreciate about Ripley as a final girl is that so often final girl's strength is born out of trauma, right? They have this trauma, and then all of a sudden, like their confidence, their sense of self is born out of that. But Ripley doesn't represent that sense of trauma, right? She's responding to the things that are happening in real time. And what we see in her is the strength of the character of her as a woman, right? And she's making these decisions. She's leading with confidence in ways that are not born from trauma. And I think that's important too, because I don't know, the contrast to that would be like, this is a wild out of left field movie, but like Captain Marvel, that, picking yourself up out of the dirt montage midway through the movie where all of a sudden now she has this, this sort of phoenix rising from the flames. I'm not denying resilience. My wife and I see resilience 500 times a day. But I think there's something to be said for women, being inherently strong, apart from the bad things that potentially happen, right?
Just being a woman
just
and having
until some.
She just has that ability. Like she's competent. She doesn't need to be like, well, I went through this, therefore I can now lead. It's just like, no, she just has that within her. Right. And so does every woman on the planet. Like, it's all there. It's yeah.
Oh, guys, so Alien. I hope you watch it with new eyes, because I don't know that you can listen to this and not. Or I don't know that you could, even do some cursory reading online and not come across something similar to this. And if you're listening to this and you're a guy who's, an alpha male and whatever, all the chaos that comes with that shit, like, humbly and kindly rethink your position a little bit. Because, your overarching societal responsibility is to contribute. to like be part of it, not to take, but to give, not just to be a receiver, but to be someone who is extending themselves in helpful ways to the people around them, regardless of gender, sexuality, ethnicity, race, whatever it is, right? And so Alien might actually be a bit of a documentary for you, which is good. So let it be that.
We all need the education. So.
Oh, Lord. We do. And, even for those of us who recognize our sense of privilege and recognize that, we do have social responsibility in the world around us, there's still that learning process. And so if you're listening and you're in general agreement with the things we've said and the things we've shared, and you feel like, hey, here's an angle that maybe you haven't considered that would be helpful for you, by all means, please reach out. Let us know. The education part never stops. And I think we're all probably, if we're honest, we're all on a journey towards a greater understanding and greater function, not just for ourselves, but for the people around us as well. So, Michael, this has been great, man.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's been a long time for us to get to this one episode, but I definitely want to have you on again.
Yeah, I would love to come on. It's been fun.
For another one. And as was the case with this one, you pick the movie, and we'll chat it up, man.
Perfect.
Before we head out, tell our listeners where they can find you. Where can they find you on the socials? Where can they find you on the platforms? Do you have a preferred platform or social that they follow you or listen to you on?
I mean, we're on Facebook, but we don't really update that one. Instagram is where you can really find us. Opening_kill_pod. Boom. That's where we're at there.
Okay.
And we are on YouTube. We just added video to our podcast, so you can check out the video version on YouTube. We also have just the audio version on YouTube as well, if you want that. And then, of course, just Apple. I'm going to stay clear from Spotify, so do Apple right now.
Fair. Spotify's got a whole lot of shit to them right now that.
Yeah, they're doing some stuff
frustrating.
I'm not about what they're doing right now. So check us out on Apple Podcast.
Guys, leave the follow, like, subscribe. All those things count. 5-star reviews, good comments. And I say this all the time, and some of you are probably sick of it, but if you have that 1-star review in mind, sleep on it and then forget about it the next morning. Like it's, and it's because most 1-star reviews are super non-constructive. It's like the ads were too loud compared to your volume, and it's like, okay, but like there's only so much we can control. Or it jolted me out of my sleep. It's like, why are you listening at 3 a.m. then? There's 19 hours in the other night, 20 hours in the day that you can listen. Anyway, so constructive comments, criticisms, whatever, always valid. Any feedback, but absolutely leave those 5-star reviews. They matter to the creator, and they're a huge shot in the arm to keep going, because sometimes you're just not sure. Like, you put all the work in, and you want it to be worthwhile. Yeah. So, Michael, thank you for choosing this movie, man. Thank you for in some ways forcing me to watch it again. It really, I watched it with a fresh set of eyes, and I always sort of love that feeling of watching a movie I'm familiar with, maybe for the first time again. So, I appreciate it, and we'll have you back on. And for those that are listening, don't take it for granted that you're listening and spending your time with me. We will catch you next week wrong show. God, I'm gonna have to edit that out. We will catch you next week on One Good Scare. Take care.